I am really curious what civilization is gonna turn into. Like when we are loving these people,
Yeah.
and when we're doing all of it, like what the heck does our future look like?
Yeah.
It's a really fascinating conversation. Are all drugs just legal? Do you go to the drugstore and buy heroin?
I mean, ideally, we'd be living in a place where like
People don't want to.
Yeah, it's just not even a thing.
We're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, It's like, oh yeah, we used to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't do that. Like we're good.
No, we don't. Oh, we don't make mummies anymore. We also don't do heroin anymore. Yeah, maybe it will be like that. Yeah, we don't mummify people anymore.
In my head, in my mind, I'm all alone, stuck in time. But in my soul, I always know I am
Hello.
Welcome
To the Second Paradigm, the show where we talk about...
We don't say podcast anymore, but I still want to say it.
I know, we could.
I mean, we could do whatever we want, but why did we stop saying podcast?
I just thought it'd be cool if we said, welcome to the Second Paradigm.
Period.
And then if we said the show and then we actually had something to say, but we still haven't written it. So now we just pause awkwardly and we never think about it until we're right here. And then we go, the show where, but it's kind of fun because it's this ongoing joke.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. That's context. So welcome to the Second Paradigm, the show where we talk about spiritual things, and where normally on Fridays we do
have a thing because you said that
I do
on
say that every
Wednesday.
time. I know.
Yeah, where we talk about.
We normally on Fridays talk
spiritual
about
things.
current events, but today we actually want to talk about pricing.
Drugs.
Oh. Very different ideas from what we're talking about. That's really, really funny. That's really, really funny.
Okay.
I thought we were going to go the direction of like spirituality and pricing and all of those things. But we did talking about like marijuana and drugs and and I think there's really big threads that we can do there. That feels like the significantly ballsier podcast. You know what Fridays are? Fridays are just our ballsy podcast. Literally the
Balls
past
out.
2 Fridays. Balls out. The past 2 Fridays have been podcasts where we're like,
That's
are we
true.
going to share that?
Yeah, let's talk about
So is
it.
that just our Friday podcast?
Yeah, I mean, we can.
Whatever. We don't need to look for trends and then make it a thing.
No,
that's
'cause
what I'm trying to do.
yeah.
That's ridiculous. I'm trying to box myself out.
Yeah.
Make life hard. Why don't I just give
Wait.
myself freedom to be able to talk about the
Box
things
yourself
that we really want
out.
to
You mean
talk
box yourself in?
Yeah. I don't know, but I don't know why box myself out made sense too. But now that you say box myself in, I'm confused.
Like you put yourself in a box.
Yes. I'm trying to, yes, box myself in to a structure.
Yes.
It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So we can talk about intuition and pricing and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Is that kind of boring?
I don't know.
I
don't know.
I bet if we went in this direction, we'd get our very first thumbs down. So I
Oh.
think we should talk about marijuana.
Our very first thumbs down. Okay, we can talk about it. Yeah, let's go there, right? We moved to Washington. Marijuana's legal here. And
I feel like it's like legal everywhere, huh?
yeah,
I don't
it's
really
getting
know.
legalized everywhere. And even some of the presidential candidates are talking about legalizing other drugs potentially and other things being legal. And I think maybe even psilocybin mushrooms have been
And or
legalized somewhere, or they're talking about it somewhere, which that's wild to me too.
I think there's a distinction too between legalization and decriminalizing.
Yes, I think you're right. I was thinking about that the other day too.
Okay. Oh, we didn't even talk about it.
Yeah.
Or I didn't research it further. But there's something there.
Yeah.
Which I can understand. I'm like, okay. Because then it kind of like pops out the like, oh, you're bad and wrong and need to be locked up in jail, and more like, hey, can we help?
Yes. I think that's the idea. So then would the legal ramifications be more so like you have to go get help? Is that the thing?
I don't know.
I don't entirely know.
I didn't look into it at all.
I didn't look into this at all. I didn't know we were going to talk about this. I thought we were going to talk about pricing.
Pricing of drugs. Oh, I know. Okay.
Did you pay too much for that eighth last week? Let's talk about it.
Use coupon code L2P.
Download Honey now, the free browser extension. It helps you save on your marijuana. Not true. Although it's a good browser extension. I've seen other companies do ads for them. Yeah, we can talk about marijuana.
Okay.
We can do it.
We can do it. So we went to Portland over the weekend. And as soon as we got out of the car, there was this guy that came up to David and me, but I like put my invisible cloak on. And he was like, "Hey man, you got a light?" He's like, "Do you guys dabble in cannabis?" And
he had this big, fat blunt.
Huge. Like the size of a cigar.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Aren't you already high out of your goddamn gourd right now?" Like I was like, "Where are you?" Like I didn't feel any essence. I didn't see any light in his eye. I didn't see any soul.
Yeah.
And I got so triggered by it. And I was like, man, what the fuck? And like the vibe in Portland feels way more chilled out than Seattle. Like the energy there just felt like, and then, you know, I mean, it's legal both places. So
yeah.
And I'm just deeply triggered around it in general.
Yeah.
As my dad smoked weed my entire life and said, "This is what the Indians used to do, Miriam. It's fine." And I would like help him. Like he would like sit cross-legged in front of his like big planter thing with the like neon lights and jugs of distilled water. And he had red Solo cups with all these little plants in them. And I would like help him trim them with his red Swiss Army knife.
Oh my God.
I would sit in his
that.
lap
Wow.
in his like acid wash jeans. Yeah.
Oh,
and then he would microwave the weed to like dry it out quicker. And then it was before the times of digital microwaves. So it was like the ding sound, and that specific sound, I literally, if I hear it or something similar to it, I like can smell. I can like smell marijuana nuked.
It's funny.
Weed.
So essentially like vaping the marijuana in the microwave.
Yeah. And then he'd like crush it all up and roll joints, and he kept them in an Altoid container. And he also had like this little wooden thing that he kept him in, and he would get extremely high on all of our driving expeditions, which according to the gigantic billboard that we read today about cannabis, it said, "Do not operate heavy machinery."
Well, yeah, of course.
Well, my dad, I don't know. I guess he didn't get that memo. So there's just like a lot of stuff around it. And I remember he would like, because he'd pick me up from Massachusetts and we'd drive to Ohio. And then we drive back. He dropped me back off for the summer or whatever it was, whatever season it was. But I would fall asleep in the car, and then he would light up, and then I would smell it and I'd wake up, but I'd pretend I was still sleeping because I didn't know like how to interact, you know, with him or it or all of it. So it's just like weird. Like I just have like weird vibes around the whole thing. I get that like people do it in the privacy of their own home and like can tap into like creative flow states and all of that stuff. And you can access that anyway, just by taking a goddamn deep breath, like of air, pure air. And I just like, I don't know. There's something about it that I'm like, everything in me is like, nope, 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 nope. Like, and it goes across the board for all drugs. Sugar, on the other hand, total admitted addict.
Yes. But like reality melting substances.
I can't. Like even alcohol anymore. Like I'm such a no to it. And it's just hard to be around because I want to like be in these conversations and like, I want to be here and I want to remember my time here. And I feel like all that stuff, I spent years drinking. I spent years smoking myself. My God, my friend and I drove home one time in high school. I was going like 30 on the highway. We were both so high. I was just focused on like staying in between the lines. Sure. And like, with Sarah, oh my God. She's like, "Oh, Miriam, you need to drive faster. You're going so slow." But like, I don't know. It's like that phase came and left. And it's just so weird that it's legal. Like, it's just weird that, and like, it's CBD everything. And like, I get it. And I'm also like, I feel like we're numbing. I feel like this is a Band-Aid. I feel like this isn't actually the truth of the solution. Like, I feel like the same way with pharmaceutical companies. Like, I'm like, fuck, you're fucking numbing out. What the fuck? What's actually here?
Yeah.
Friday.
So I didn't know that you were deeply triggered from your past, because I think there's an element of that, which I'm glad you acknowledged.
Oh, yeah.
because that feels like a piece of it.
For sure.
You know what I mean? But I think there is also a legitimate like numbing out piece. And I think the piece that bothered me the most in spiritual communities is when drug experiences, I guess marijuana, a little bit less so marijuana,
more
and
like
more so
LSD.
like psychedelics and like the really, really deep, like 5-MeO DMT or like those, or like NNDMT, like those things where you just completely, like reality just completely melts away. I think those experiences tend to be deified, where they end up getting called medicines, and those plant medicines end up becoming some sort of deity in and of themselves, where like they become less of like a tool to access something and more of the experience in and of itself being a thing that you end up chasing and looking for those mind melting experiences where reality is bleeding away, and you begin to associate consciousness and light and truth and deep intuitive knowing with these really distorted psychedelic experiences. And I think even with marijuana, I feel like it's a smaller tweak, but there's still, I mean, you hear stories all the time about like really, really intense trips. And I think if you smoke enough, reality does kind of melt away into a certain degree, and you like kind of forget who you are and what you're doing and all of that. What I'm really curious about is, I just guess the alternatives, you know, like what else is there? Is it absolutely necessary to use substances to be able to access intuitive truth?
No.
Yes. And I think that's like, yeah. And that's the conclusion that I've come to as well. So once I've realized this, right, and now that I'm in this place where like I haven't taken any substances in a long time, like mind melting, like smoking weed or anything of anything. I'm trying to think if I have during our relationship. I don't know, but it's been a while. And then I think we've had alcohol like twice or something.
Maybe, yeah.
So there's like,
we did smoke weed one time. Remember? I was so paranoid. I was like, oh my God, everybody knows what I'm thinking. What am I thinking?
Yes. Early relationship. Yes.
That shit fucks
But since
me
we've moved
up.
to Seattle and even before, and there was a time where you're like, maybe I should get some weed because it was just
It's
everywhere.
everywhere.
It's everywhere and it's legal and there's
And
signs.
everyone's
like,
talking about it, and the
420.
farmer's market people are talking about it, and then
Yes.
there's like all these like cool little things you can smoke it out of, and there's like all these things. There's like, it's like a whole world I know nothing about. And I was like, oh, maybe we should stop, and like maybe there's something here for me. But when I really checked in, it was like, yeah, no, like just sit and write. Like you're going to get the same, you're pulling the same thread.
Yes. So I think this is the angle that I want to take, because I don't think I want to make psychedelics or marijuana wrong.
I do.
Okay.
This is going to be the soundbite that ruins our career.
No, it's fine. Because I don't want to make them wrong, because I recognize that they have a place in people's journeys, and I recognize that there's just phases that people are in, and there are stages and phases of people's lives that really help them a lot in certain places.
Yes.
And where I really see it the most is when someone's life is completely in autopilot, and they go and they have like a ceremony or they do something and they're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like it cracks their autopilot wide open.
Yep.
But I don't think that's useful when you're building a soul aligned intuitive life, because you don't need to crack open your entire reality context.
No.
You don't need to break the systems that you do have.
Right.
So I think the lens that I want to take on this is like deifying these substances. I think I want to like build awareness around that. And yeah, just bring some awareness to that. Like you can do it without it. So like for me, there was a very distinct point in my life where my channel opened, and I said to myself, if I'm going to be a public channel, I can't take anything ever again, literally ever again. And it was this very distinct knowing that if I'm going to be a channel and I'm going to put my own identity out in the world and say, okay, I'm a public channel. Yep. I tap into a non-local consciousness, into a soul architecture, which people don't even know what that means when I say that, into a soul architecture that then I communicate with another consciousness who then gives me an outside perspective on reality.
You already sound like you're all sorts of fucked up.
They're going to be like, okay, when's the last time you've done drugs?
Yeah.
and I'm going to say the entire time that my channel's been open, I haven't done drugs.
Yeah.
Like my channel opened and I said, I will never touch these substances because I need to preserve a level of deep credibility in all of this. And for me, I just want to prove to myself that I'm not crazy constantly, because internally I'm constantly checking myself.
Yeah.
Like, am I crazy? Am I starting a cult? Nope. And or like, you know, and it comes up and it comes up and it comes up because being raised a Jehovah's Witness and being in spiritual communities, I've seen both.
Yeah.
And I hold myself to an extraordinarily high standard in the purity of my channel and in the purity of my relationships to others in that, and the dynamics that are there with mentor and mentee and all of that.
Yeah.
I take it so fucking seriously and I'm constantly checking myself. So for me personally, to dabble in something that's mind altering substances, for me, makes me lose credibility, even in my own self, just to myself.
Yeah.
So I do it for myself.
Yeah.
But what I find really interesting is if I can access all these things without that,
Yeah.
why are we doing it? What's genuinely the use? And I think there's a level of credibility internally with these intuitive messages that I think is getting blurred here. And that's the real thing that I feel here. The thing I feel dropping in more and more as we talk about this is if you are using a substance in some way to gain access to another state of consciousness, there's always going to be this little shadow of a doubt that's like, bro, it's just the weed. Bro, it's just the psychedelics. It's just
Sis.
the chemicals. It's just chemicals, sis. There's always going to be this little piece that's like, yeah, but everything outside of that pocket is true. And that's just the space I go for creativity. That's just the space I go where like I get fucked up on some chemical reactions and then everything blurs together and I can make new connections. It goes really, really, it's like the almost
It keeps
opposite.
it outside of yourself.
Yes. It makes it an external thing when really in actuality, I think it's altering your state enough to where your soul can get in. Or where other beings can get in. I think often in lots of those where other beings can come in and just kind of fuck with people. I think that's very common. People don't really talk about it. But all of that landscape exists without any substances at all. And I think that's the real crazy thing to acknowledge. That's the really, really crazy thing. Because from an external view, like from my deep skeptic, if I hear us talking about these things, I expect someone who's talking about things like this to be just smoking mad weed all the time, like just mad pot and doing like monthly deep psychedelic trips. I just kind of expect it. And there are times where I hear people talk about some of their experiences and I'm like, that's not the sober version.
I know. Remember,
you know what I mean?
we were talking, we were in
I remember.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
We were like going to collaborate with someone on something. I'm going to say super zoomed out. And they were talking about an experience and I felt the same thing. I was like, and then they mentioned that they were at Burning Man and then later drugs came up it was like nonchalant, like, oh yeah, when I did DMT, it was like, oh, that's why that was a shade of gray instead of pure white light, what you were talking about. Like, that's why it wasn't truth all the way through, because it gets like tainted or something. Like there's something like, there's something for me that like, instead of it being like a straight rod up and down, it's like, it goes off in this like direction. Like when I just even feel into like, just all of this, like it's, and like, and it's the same thing with like alcohol. Like, I think there's pieces of like really enjoying like when I think of my friend Pat, who's a brewer at Allagash, plug, subtle plug. Like when I think of him, like he's there for the craft. Like he's there for the chemistry. He likes mixing like the flavors and like the chemistry, biology. I don't know, all of it, how it ferments, like the whole process.
And there are some people who are like growing marijuana who I feel very similar about in a weird way. That made me think of them. Where they're like talking about the exact chemical things and the breakdowns and like the strains and all of it and like I don't know.
They're like testing it and they're like, you know, do the two quick sniffs and like swirl it around and pick up the flavor notes and what you're getting. And there's something like really like, I guess I can understand that. I guess when it's taken to the extreme and you're like buying like a 12 pack of, I don't know, fucking Natty Light every night and smushing beer cans on your basement floor.
Yeah.
I was a maintenance guy that worked for me back in the day. He would do that. He would friggin' just smash cans on his basement floor and come in like hungover and reeking of alcohol.
Yeah.
Like that to me, I'm like, okay, there's obviously something else going on here.
Yeah. I think we can acknowledge the like level of escapism that can be used with any substance.
Yeah.
Anything. I mean,
Sugar.
we can even go to, food, anything. You can, and even like reading. Like you can just go into
consuming.
books. Yeah, you can just go
content.
into books for hours and hours and hours and start to escape your life. You can go into your phone for hours and hours and hours, try to escape your life.
Yep.
You can like, I don't know, go into anything and try to escape life. Like there's always an escapist kind of pocket to be able to keep awareness around.
I guess when the behavior is different. Like when someone behaves differently when they're high versus when they're not high. Or like when they're drunk versus not drunk, or when they're in their body versus out of their body. Like I think that's what triggers it for me, because I'm like, wait, where are you though? Like where are you in there? Like someone reading a book and then coming and then coming into conversation, I'm like, oh, you're still here.
Yes.
Like they maybe they're like lost in thought or something like that, but there's like it's just weird. Like the kid that asked you for a light for his big old blunt. Like, I don't know. It just like, I was like, where is he in there? Like, I can't even see him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. That to me, like when the behavior shifts, that's when I'm like, ugh, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel safe. Like, I don't want to be here. Like, I don't want to be around this. I don't want to be near this. I don't want to smell it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I just want you to be you and know that that's enough, and know that there's a divine connection there, and that you can pull through exactly what you're going to try to pull through in an altered state. You don't have to alter your state through a substance.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there are times where I feel even similar about like breath work or like.
I like that it's just breath though.
I do. But there's something about deeply altering your state that, I don't know, is challenging for me. It's challenging. And I think breathwork teeters for me, because sometimes I'm like, that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But I also see elements of it where it's like deeply just like hyperventilating and like depriving your body of oxygen or over, you know.
I think there's a lot of things with the breathwork stuff. I'm thinking of my friend Leandra in particular. Like, I feel like she's just a fabulous facilitator. I mean, we've done some breathwork stuff and the circles haven't been super clean and tight knit and pristine.
And maybe that's it. Maybe that's actually what I'm feeling.
I think you're more
that is what I'm feeling.
The
Thank
thing.
you.
Because even if you
That's
feel
helpful.
into Leandra, even though we've never done a breathwork class with her,
Totally.
I can feel the
That feels good.
pristineness of the field that she holds.
Yes. And I've had some weird experiences at breathwork things, and I've had other people around me have weird experiences.
Well, and then we
in
did
it too.
some fucking circle jerk after breathwork, and you had to say your experience, and then fucking everybody's spilling all their trauma everywhere. And I'm like, yo, I am not available for this girl with the fucking black sweatshirt hood up talking about your rape story. Like, I'm not here for this. That's not why I came for the breathwork.
Right after everyone gets blown open. And then you sit in like a soup of challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe that's what I'm feeling. It's just such a
circle jerk.
I'm just trying to sort through all of this, you know?
This is our ballsy podcast.
I know. This is our ballsy podcast because we don't have it sorted. Like, we didn't sit down and go, all right, how are we going to talk about this?
No, because we were going to talk about
because we thought we were going to talk about pricing, like art and like intuitive abilities. That's where I was in. So now I'm trying to sort through this and make sure that like it's true, you know? Because I don't want to come out and just be like, marijuana's bad and like everything's bad and don't do it, because it's just not true enough to me. Yeah. I just really want to get to the root of like what's actually here. Like, what are we really feeling here? Because for me, there's a level of the deification thing for me is really a thing.
Yeah.
I think there are communities and there are pockets of the collective that deify substances as intuitive abilities. And I think a piece of that is it's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier to say all of my intuitive abilities are me smoking pot. All of my intuitive abilities are me having these experiences, are the ceremonies I went to Peru in and had these incredible experiences in. There's a chemical explanation for these non-explainable things. Yep. And I don't know, maybe that's the allure.
Yeah. And I think like as a collective, we're not fully comfortable talking about it, just accepting it as fact and truth of this reality, that there are psychic phenomena, things that happen with being sober.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
But it's not fully integrated into our day-to-day language. Like you're seen as like ungrounded, or you're seen as like, oh, they're just so out there. Oh, they must do drugs if they're talking about that.
Yeah.
Like there's all these things that we've just as a collective decided to make true. But the truer truth is that these things are happening without any substance. I mean, you could just walk outside.
Yeah.
You stick your finger out and I'm pretty sure like a blue jay will land on it if that's what's here for you. Like there's magic everywhere.
Yeah.
And like you can see energy on the wall. Like you don't have to like
Plenty of people
do anything to get to that state. Just keep staring at the wall. You're going to fucking see something.
Yeah. 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 I think we're just trying to find like an explanation for all of these things, and it's a really
I think because it's scary to be with and it's scary to own, the same way that like you want to feel credibility, like you internally, it's really important to you to own it all the way through. And I think that it's scary for people to own the psychicness and the energetic realm without any substance and be like, oh yeah, I was really high, and like laugh it off, and it becomes this like nonchalant thing, like, oh yeah. Or like, oh yeah, I got that download when I was high. Yeah. It's like, it's all connected to that rather than just, I just want people to know that it's here already. It's right now. Yeah. And I don't even want to be cheesy about it. They're like, it's within you, but it like is.
Yeah.
It's within your oversoul structure. Like just ask.
Yeah.
You can just say, hey, if I were to get high tonight, what would be my miraculous download? And then you'd get it.
Probably. Yeah.
You would. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the oversoul, the intelligence is like, oh my God, cool. Because then you get to work with that more directly without being in any sort of altered state.
Yeah.
What you're doing is you're like building up this resiliency and this relationship to connect, like while you're at your kid's soccer game, like while you're like going for a walk, while you're driving, while you're in conversation with someone, you're getting like intuitive pings and you're able to translate those. Because this is all here, like this whole energetic world, and being able to translate it and engage with it and be with it. It's there's no separation. There's nothing you need to do to access it. It's already here right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have it buttoned up in a pretty bow. Maybe I do.
No,
Maybe
that was
that's
great.
the bow.
That was awesome. It was very awesome. I think that is one of my main frustrations, is that these substances are seen as a pathway to divinity and to truth, and I don't actually think they are. I don't think they're sustainable long-term collective solutions at all.
I know. And I think that's why it was so important that we talk about, like we've talked about it, or we've just been with it and worked on embodying it ourselves, like grounded spirituality, because we came from such a community that it wasn't grounded. Spirituality wasn't grounded at all. And then from San Diego to Massachusetts, where it's like incredibly grounded, all brain, like academia, like dead land. It's like so dense. Yeah. So we were really grounding all of those teachings and all of you were channeling and bringing through the rest of the book.
Yeah. I know. I was bringing through a channeled book in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But it makes sense because there was like room for it to just like drop. Yeah. Like there was a landing space for it. In San Diego, I never felt grounded there. That place was it was hard for me to be there. But yeah, I love like just making all of these spiritual things, like just being really human about like what's really here. And I think that's what I love so much about our work and all the things we talk about. And I know that you channel a being, a non-local intelligence, and like it's still so grounded. It's still so rooted in what's real and what's here, and talking about financial hardship and talking about being an empath and talking about navigating darkness, and whether that's like etheric darkness or like your pesky neighbor. Like we're talking about all these things that are very
to navigate very real life. And
here.
The
lights just flashed. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I just think there's this like, I don't know, there's just this fascination with the non-physical. There's this fascination with all of this. And I think I think we're kind of collectively using substances to tap into those things. I don't think it's a terrible phase of life. Like I understand it.
Yeah, but didn't we already do it in like the 70s and stuff, the 60s and 70s? Like,
yeah, but it can kind of smush down.
I know. It's weird that we repeat so much. Like even as you're reading Andrew Yang's book, what is it? A War on Normal People. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about UBI from like Nixon days.
Yeah, Richard Nixon. And it almost passed, and it went through the House of, I didn't know that it went through the House of Representatives.
Yep.
It got an overwhelming majority in the population. There was an overwhelming majority of people who supported universal basic income.
They actually wanted it to be more.
It went through the House of Representatives, and it didn't get through the Senate and get passed because Democrats wanted a better deal.
Yes.
So they wanted a better deal, even more money. Instead of like $12,000 a year, they wanted like $36,000 a year for families.
Yep.
And then it didn't pass, and it got dropped for like, 40 years?
Yeah.
My goodness.
It was such a moment reading that in the book. This is like a sidestep, but what connected for me was like truly passing the baton. Like when I think of like my mom and her, like her diagnosis with bipolar and like a mental breakdown and all of that stuff, which in the 90s, but I see it as a spiritual awakening. Yeah. And it's like all my experiences that I was having during my spiritual awakening, when I went to her with them, she was like, oh yeah, me too. That happened to me too. I was like, what the fuck? And it's literally like a passing of the baton. Like she got as far as she could with it. She like hit a wall, and now she's like medicated, diagnosed bipolar, all of that stuff. And none of it feels true to me or her, which is just fascinating. But anyway, it's like she got as far as she could with it. And then like, it's like she passed me the baton, and then I kept going, and I kept going through the darkness, and I didn't go to a psych ward, and I wasn't put on medication, and I just still kept going. And like, it feels the same way when we were reading that about universal basic income. It's like they got as far as they could, hit a wall, and now here we are again. And we're like, it's resurfacing. They're passing the baton. It makes sense that when we talk about like your ancestors prayed for you, like it makes sense. It makes sense that like there's this whole squad of living and dead people from your lineage that are cheering you on to continue forward and to keep going.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to me that like we just keep looping these like same ideas, and they get like a little bit further, and then we like loop it again, and it gets a little bit further.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we're starting to get to now with all of these substances, I would hope so. I would hope that we're not the only ones thinking this. You know,
I was talking about UBI, but what are you talking?
I know. Well, I'm going back to the original point. You were making a point on UBI because you said that marijuana happened in the hippies.
Oh,
you said,
yeah,
didn't we
yeah.
already do this? So I was coming back to the point we were on.
Good call.
I would hope that people are coming to very similar ideas, that it's not actually the substances, it's just divinity. It's just truth. It's just soul.
Yeah.
This is the thing that we've written off collectively for a long time.
Yep.
I mean, it happened in psychology, right? It went like Jung's ideas just got crushed because they were too esoteric. And then we went, let's just go what we can measure. Yeah. And like in science and like a very physical science, it's like, oh yeah, that's a little too esoteric. Let's go just what we can measure. And we've kind of gone into this route. And it has validity. And I love that science is doing that. And I love that spirituality is taking its own route, and that there's this whole other pocket of the collective. But I think in order for spiritual people around the world to have a level of credibility to the rest of the world, it can't be substances.
Sober up, buttercup.
The solution can't be like, listen, scientists, if you'd like to awaken and see what we're seeing, smoke a little doob, and you'll have an incredible light experience. Or like, come do these crazy substances with me, and you'll have this incredible experience. I think it's more so like really dialing into the subtleties of their reality that they're already experiencing, and being able to tease that apart and go, this is soul's place. Yeah. Here's these things like, that you're not able to explain that I can explain from my worldview because I've gone through it, and I can see the spiritual perspective in this. I think it's very grounded. It's very practical. And I think that's how we get to the Richard Dawkins of the worlds, of this world, is by, he's the like basically leader of the new atheist movement, like one of the big faces, wrote The God Delusion. I think that's how we get to these really big figures and help the larger consciousness shift, is by finding really grounded things. And it can't just be do all these substances and you'll wake up.
You know what it's reminding me of too is like, I read a lot of NDE experiences. I'm obsessed with near-death experiences, like crazy obsessed. And most of the time, or what I've read in the books that I'm drawn to, are when it happens to someone, a scientist, when it happens to a doctor, when it happens to someone that's like so logical, linear, doesn't believe in spirit, doesn't believe in soul, doesn't believe in any of that. And then they have this experience that wakes them up, and then they write a
they're like on
book.
the operating table and they like hear what the doctor's saying. And
Yeah,
then they come out of it and they're like, did you say this? And they're like, how'd you know? That's weird.
It's like, oh, did you chew this gum? Yeah. Did you play this song? Like all these things that they have access to. And then it completely transforms their life. But what I'm feeling in this conversation is like, that doesn't have to happen.
Yeah.
We don't have to have near-death experiences. We don't have to have blown out experiences in order to accept that this is a part of the reality that we live in.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm so smart.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Thanks. Oh, that felt good.
Yeah, it feels good to take all the thoughts and condense them down, right?
I know.
I know. I get that high every few days. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, girl.
It's your synthesized high. That feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's true.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. It feels like that moves us into the world where we don't have diseases. We don't get cancer to have to change the trajectory of our life. We don't have this terrible thing happen to our physical body because we need to wake up, because we need to choose differently. Like that, it just doesn't, it makes sense why more advanced civilizations don't experience those things that we do, because those are just, they're not necessary. When you're able to accept the etheric reality that's actually here too.
Yeah.
That you can convene with all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, like when I look forward into the future, I don't see a world full of pot smokers who take a tab of LSD once a month or like are microdosing mushrooms to access consciousness. I just don't. And I also don't see just completely rational across the board 100%, you know, it's like just straight brain. Like there's a blend.
Yeah.
And I also don't see everyone being like, where are you from? You know, like what ET civilization are you from? Like I also don't see that, you know, like there's a deeply grounded.
You're from Earth, bitch.
Yeah, there's a deeply grounded spirituality that's integrated everything. I think if you're messing with those chords, you can hear it on the actual thing.
IT Dave.
Yeah, there's just this deeply grounded element that I think is really important. Really important. I love that you went into even disease and into all of these pockets because
it's just not, that's all the stuff that feels unnecessary. It's necessary right now for our human experience because it wakes us up.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was just talking with a friend about this. Like, it's not the pain and the turmoil and the rock bottoms. Eventually, I imagine they won't be a necessary part of the human experience. I imagine it'll evolve out.
Yeah.
Because we'll be listening and we'll be helping other civilizations that are experiencing the pain and the turmoil and the disruption. And it's like, hey guys, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
I'm super zoomed out. I'm probably like 1.3 billion years from now.
1.3 billion years?
Roughly. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I just feel super zoomed out. I don't know that I'll see that in my lifetime. But
yeah, I
feel that as a possibility for humanity if we just keep choosing to just listen and trust our intuition and trust our knowing.
Yeah.
Okay. Video only.
Sure.
Or you have a thing. You have a thought.
It's just a lot. There's just a lot coming in. So yeah, let's keep unpacking this on video only. But for those of you who are just tuning into audio, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed just us exploring, I don't know, you know, marijuana and substances from this perspective, because there's something
I hope you like Ballsy Fridays.
Yeah, there's something that's felt a little off to both of us that we haven't had this conversation in this way.
We haven't talked about
we
it.
haven't dove this deep. We're just both kind of like, yeah, we don't really like it, you know? And we'll talk about the legalization about it, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I think legalization, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, I think it's good that we're not putting people in jail for like
it's
a fifth.
stupid.
You know, that's
Dumb.
stupid. That's
Yeah.
dumb. But at the same time, I also don't think that that's suddenly unlocking the solution to consciousness for the planet.
Right.
And I think that's the extreme that we go to sometimes as a collective that I don't agree with. And I think it needs to be reined back a little bit.
And you know what's fascinating, total side note, but Fort Bragg, when we drove through there to find sea glass on our way up here to Seattle, we met that local woman and she said, this is some cold brew.
Thanks.
We met that local woman and she's like, oh yeah, ever since marijuana has been legalized, we don't like our economy is doing terrible here because all the drug dealers, like they went out of business.
Yeah, it's funny.
So it's interesting to see what's being legalized, but like where is the like come from place in that? Is it from the government just wanting more money? Like is it from or
I think there's elements of that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So it's like it to me it doesn't feel like it's not the government being like government. I can't even take that word seriously right now. That's so weird. But it's like the powers that be or whatever. I don't know. It's just like, are they really thinking from like a second paradigm perspective? Are they thinking about what's in the greatest good for the whole?
Of course. Well, I was going to say, of course not. But I mean, I think they are to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
I don't think the government's just all corruption. You know, I just think the perspectives that they're using are very like statistical, very much like we could be getting this 8% extra tax boost, and we'd keep people out of jail for doing this really like nominal thing. Like, how is this really that different from alcohol, which is already legal? It's actually safer in many cases. Like, why are we throwing these people in jail and not these people? Totally. Like, let's just take this off the black market, and we're going to have way less shady drug dealers everywhere. I mean, I think there's merit to that whole line of reasoning, but I don't think they're like, how do we awaken consciousness? You know, that's not our governmental drive.
No,
you know,
totally. Oh my God, that would be awesome.
It would be awesome, and I think one day we'll get there.
Yeah,
I do think one day we'll get there.
I would love to be a spiritual advisor to government officials. That would be a dream.
I would too.
Oh my God, I would love for them to vox me all the things.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would sit and I would listen.
I would hope that's a direction that we're going.
Yeah.
You know, I think right now
that.
we're really focused on entrepreneurship, which in and of itself is kind of doing that to an extent, helping the people who are helping people is really being able to plant pretty wide seeds. Yeah. But then, I think there's like a consulting advisory role.
I love that.
For like, there's also like internet personalities that we've been orbiting for a really long time. That I think there's elements of that we can advise. And then I'm really curious about politics. Really curious.
Yeah.
And we both have this fascination with both.
So much.
Yeah. We have this crazy
it's so not
fascination.
Spiritual. Like when you first awaken, you're like, don't watch the news.
Don't watch the news. Yeah. And now we're like on it.
I know. I'm like news.
Yeah.
Where's the truth?
And I think that's the switch. This is a cool place to end for the audio version. Is like that's I think the switch that we're starting to make, and that's why it's becoming less about substances and altered states of consciousness, and more about like, how do we bring this thing we already have access to, our deep intuition that everyone has access to, just isn't acknowledging, into everyday life.
Yes.
How do we integrate it here?
Yes.
Not how do we blast out as far as possible to get more?
Yeah.
Because we have plenty.
Yeah.
We have everything we need. Why? How do we just actually use it now? How do we use it? And I think that's the thing that we're really dialing into here.
Oh, I love that.
All right, let's kick over to video only. We'll see you later, audio fam. Keep going.
Keep trusting.
And welcome home.
Welcome home.
What's up, a video crew?
I know, it's Friday, so that means I got to lay down.
It's Friday.
I gotta lay down.
Friday, and gotta get down on Friday.
Not lay down, but just like relax. Kick back.
Everybody's listening to this podcast Friday.
Get my mustard Friday. Pants. Now,
Second Paradigm Friday.
David and I both have mustard pants.
Miriam just keeps talking and I just keep singing.
I know.
We're just not acknowledging each other at all.
No, it's okay.
Not in the slightest. Okay. This is also the time where we change our camera angle because...
Oh, you can't see the screen back there. David set up a cute screen.
Oh, yeah, you can't.
It's hard to read.
It is hard to read. It says the second paradigm, but it also might be mirrored and backwards.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I set up a nice little logo back there. So yeah, I love this conversation. I think it was really cool. My throat's definitely scratchy from
my throat is scratchy too. You know what's another thing too that's strange is jail.
Jail.
That we like put people in jail. Like, I don't know. Why aren't we like helping people? Like we think it's like, oh, just put them behind bars and the world will be better. It's like, yeah, but that, whatever that is, like whatever that character, that person played out, like is in all of us. And by putting that behind bars isn't actually doing anything. Like, if anything, you're going to perpetuate the cycle.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a similar idea to like suppressing emotions. Like, it's like, if I just pretend that this piece of me isn't here, then I can just be the 80% of me that's perfect. You know,
Totally.
it's a very similar thing that I think everyone's doing across the board emotionally.
Yeah.
I think that's how it shows up in our collective psyche.
Yep.
Is like, if we just put these people who like murder people and don't believe in the same values as we do behind bars, then, you know, civilization minus them is great. Everything's wonderful. It is funny.
It's
but
weird.
what, like 1 in 5 Black Americans are behind bars? It's like something crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
Are we really? How many people are in jail right now?
I know.
Because that's insane.
I know.
I think more people are in jail now than like were enslaved back when the Civil War happened. There's like crazy statistics
crazy
like that where it's like, are you serious? That's what we're doing? That's
I
really
know.
what
We're
doing?
missing the mark. And those people, like, I want them to be loved on too, just as much as anybody else.
Yeah. I am really curious what civilization's gonna turn into. Like when we are loving these people.
Yeah.
You know, and when we're doing all of it, like what the heck does our future look like?
Yeah.
It's a really fascinating conversation. Are all drugs just legal? Do you go to the drugstore and buy heroin? You know? Like, do you like?
I think like
where are we going?
Ideally, we'd be living in a place where like it's
people don't want to.
Yeah, it's just not
We're
even a thing.
We're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, we used to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't do that. Like
Yeah.
we're good.
No, we don't eat mud anymore.
We don't eat mud.
Yeah.
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 I don't know, right?
Yeah, we don't make mummies anymore. We also don't do heroin anymore. You know, yeah, maybe it will be like that. Yeah, we don't mummify people anymore.
Yeah. Would it be like that, you think?
Maybe.
It's just
Although
like
we still do put people in coffins in the ground. I was
know,
going to say we
that's
don't
so-
build monuments for our kings, but we do actually.
It's so strange. That to me is so weird. Especially being in Louisiana with the above ground coffins. You like drive through because they're at and under sea level in New Orleans.
Yeah.
So all the coffins are above ground. It is
Because if you dig,
creep
it's
water.
just whoa.
Creep city. It is so crazy driving through there. I was like,
Above ground.
oh my God, we can
Wait,
pull up
what?
pictures after. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they're in these like things. It was like how it looked in Mexico. Do you remember that cemetery that we rode our bikes by with all the above ground? Okay. Anyway, keep going. What were you going to say?
I have no idea because now I'm just thinking about above ground cemeteries.
It's weird that we like bury the bodies. I still think that's weird. Cremation makes so much more sense to me.
Yeah. Oh, but what I was saying was like, what does our future look like?
Ours, like you and me, or like the world? Like
The world,
how far?
the collective-
1.3
the
billion
collective
years from
future.
now?
Yeah. Well, because I'm curious. What I do think's happening is that we're waking up to this. I think the first to second paradigm shift for me helps me to imagine this with more clarity than I've ever been able to imagine it. Because I'm not just looking at like where are the trends going, you know, like, okay, artificial intelligence will probably be a thing, and like cars, they're exploring flying cars, but they're super loud. So like me, you know, like Elon's tunnels will be a thing. Maybe we'll be a multiplanetary civilization. Like there's all these things that are already happening. You can follow with those trends. But what I'm really curious is like the undercurrent of consciousness that's
Like
shift
how we
that's
treat each other?
happening. How we view what reality is. Because I think that's where all of this comes from. So when I think about like my own personal things or my own personal challenges or a personal individual challenge from anyone, I think body soul. That helps me.
Yeah.
When I think of collective, I go first paradigm, second paradigm. I go first paradigm, everyone's just thinking about themselves. So that's why we have like a jobs crisis instead of a workforce liberation. Like what? Why are we talking about jobs crisis?
Yeah.
10 million people no longer have to work shitty jobs. They're going to die. Like, what do we do? Are you serious? We're worried about that? Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
These people don't have to flip burgers anymore because a robot can go like if a robot can do it, why are you sad that you don't don't get to do it anymore, you know? But I think so there's first paradigm and then there's second paradigm where we're just looking at us as a whole civilization, all working together. And I think that's where I get excited about things like UBI, because like it just makes sense that we would take care of everyone here because we have the capability to.
Yes.
Like,
And
why
it's not permanent
would we not?
solution. It's definitely a great stepping stone.
It's a baseline that then lays the foundation for everything else that gets to happen.
Yes.
But I do really think that lots of the societal systems that are here get to evolve and transition slowly with ease, that it doesn't have to be like okay, so let's let civilization completely collapse and then build from scratch. I that's a tough thing for me to see, because I do see so many solutions already taking place. Well, there's lots of people who do think that's going to happen. They're going to think in order for us to move into a better civilization, everything has to collapse. Money has to collapse in its totality.
I mean,
political system has to collapse in its totality. Total anarchy. There's no more government. Natural disasters everywhere. Everything in the ocean dies, and then we slowly start to reorganize somehow into new civilizations, and hopefully it's good. That's kind of where people are thinking these days.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't think that's necessary. I think it's just like slow and steady transition. Just like exactly how we teach and talk about soul all the time.
I fully believe that too.
Yeah. That feels more true to me than anything. I mean, fuck, we've been transitioning this entire time we've been here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's been one mega slow evolution and transition.
And I think people don't take that into account. I don't think people take into account how much we've actually shifted in the past 20 years.
Oh my God. With the internet alone. I know, because just the other day we were talking about
it's been a while.
Wheatgrass shot. Just the other day we were talking about the internet.
Yeah. How
and I was like, my mom probably, of course, she got diagnosed with bipolar and it wasn't seen as a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Because if she was able to Google her symptoms, she probably would have found like Kundalini awakening or like something like that.
Totally.
And like she could have found maybe even like a group online that was like also experiencing like the friggin' things that she was seeing.
Yeah. And she'd probably believe something very different about herself today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the internet wasn't around when that happened.
Mm-hmm. You went to the doctor.
Yeah.
Something was wrong with you. You went to the doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think it's fascinating, and even like thinking about your dad joining the Jehovah Witness. Where does the S go? Jehovah's.
It's like
the J-Dubs.
It's a witness of Jehovah. You could think of it like that. So it's a Jehovah's Witness.
So when he joined
the Jehovah's Witnesses. When he joined the Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, sure. When he became a Jehovah's Witness.
Okay, when he became.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a confusing name.
Yeah.
Everyone gets it wrong.
So that, like, it makes sense, like, when you're searching and seeking and trying to find something, and like you stumble like into a community like physically, and you're like, oh, okay, this makes sense to me. Like this resonates. Like, but like how we have access to so much information, so much so that my mom thinks that Michelle Obama is actually a man and that the children are adopted, and she takes Fox News as Bible, which Fox News is entertainment and not factual in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary. Both sides of it. Like,
I think we're moving through it. I mean, it's a really interesting transition, but I really wholeheartedly believe that our next phase of the information, like the digital age, is curation. Like we need to move into validation of sources. We need to move into like here's the best of the best, and have like very, very aware people being able to do that. Yeah. Like it's almost like digital representatives that we're collectively voting on with our awareness. That. And it's not even that it's a like specific role that everyone has to vote on, but like the curation sites in and of themselves, just through views, are getting a sense of slip out of frame. Are getting a sense of
I slipped in
votership through just their views, and the more people that go to people, I think there'll essentially be this like unspoken rule or like role of curators of the internet, like people who are scouring the internet looking for truest truths and the things that are genuinely important to focus on for our society today, here and now. That
feels
I really wanted to play that role for a while, which is why I'm talking about it, because I just see it as a really, really big need and a really big opportunity. Because I think from the early, so when I think of like the 1990s into the 2000s, there was a lack of information in general, right? Your mom had no sense of what was happening.
Just like the newspaper.
Do you take Western medicine and the newspaper as truth, or do you watch nothing? Those were the options. But now there's blogs that say everything. There's scientific articles that say everything. Like we're at information overload, and no one can make sense of anything anymore.
Yeah, this is where we talk about like food and diet and all of that stuff. Totally. You can find anything to defend any particular.
Yes, you can eat anything and find a diet that lets you eat that thing and makes it the right thing to do and makes everyone else wrong.
Yeah.
Anything. So where we're at is a sense making stage where we need to help people make sense.
And this is what
of reality.
Yeah. And I think this is why our work is so important, is helping people connect to their own truth and their own knowing, because then they can just filter it.
Yes.
Like, it's kind of crazy to me that I'm like, wait, Mom, you got a truth sniffer. Like, why is your truth sniffer like blocked or something? You need some Flonase? Because like, what are you doing? What are you doing thinking Michelle Obama's a man with a cock? And it's just weird. It's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you and I were even like, maybe.
When you watch the videos, some of them are convincing. And it's crazy. It's so wild that you can make an argument for anything.
But what I want to see is people, and this comes back to things that we've talked about before, but like in their truth, in their intuitive knowing, in their sovereignty, able to sort. Yeah. And like, yeah.
Because what's more important to me, I think that we're going through a fake news stage where everyone's worried about truth. There are so many different layers of truth that I don't necessarily think that matters, because from various perspectives, things are true. What I'm curious about is what's actually most relevant for society. And I think that's where curation comes into play. And you need to be able to look at what's actually genuinely here for us, right? So climate change, what's actually important? What do we actually need to do as human beings, and output and find research and find those things? And then like spirituality, what's actually important? What's total nonsense? What's great? And just give like broad overviews and lay context for all of the information coming in. Because if you can look at all the information in a context of a reality context that makes sense, I think the world gets much easier to navigate. And I think that's really behind the scenes. That's kind of, I don't talk about this publicly at all, which is why I'm kind of hesitating. But just behind the scenes, that's kind of what I'm doing with B. Is I'm really trying to understand a context that lets me understand everyone and everything, and put everyone and everything on an equal playing field, where I fully understand every single pocket of civilization and the role that they're playing in the larger orchestration. Because if I can do that, and it's getting pretty close to where I'm able to have understanding, compassion for most pockets of the collective. When I think that happens,
except for the canvas guys,
then there's well, of course I get so frustrated with things. This is ridiculous. Yeah, I know you're gonna spin me back out because I'm not there yet. I'm not. I think if you can get to that place, then that context can be distributed. Yes. Because there's a sense making tool essentially that comes online, and it's a tool it's an internal technology to how to make sense of the world using soul technologies and esoteric understandings, but also using science and scientific understanding, also noticing the role that all these religions have played in the past and the technologies that they've developed in their own unique way, bridging all of those, seeing them all for what they are, and then essentially just laying a map and going, here's reality. Here's a way to look at it that helps you have compassion for everyone and sees how everything fits in. Go and do what you're most called to do. I think that's ultimately the role I want to play. That's what I want to do here.
I love that. You're doing it.
Thanks. I know. I feel like 3% of the way.
That's better than what it was.
That's
it
true.
Like 1%?
Yeah. Like a year ago, I said like 1%. I feel much closer now. 3. So. But I still feel very, very far away, because I think there's a whole new company that needs to come online. There's whole software that needs to be built, and figuring out the systems to how to make it scalable, because I'm obviously not going to be the curator. Yeah, I'm going to build all the software and be like the master curator for planet Earth. Like, that's ridiculous. So it's like, it's systematizing and being able to use the maps and understanding to be able to create a framework that then doesn't involve me whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because if it involves me, I'm going to be the biggest bottleneck ever for the humanity's awakening. Like, everything comes through Dave. Like, that's ridiculous. It's so stupid. The fact that I even do all of our stuff now is stupid, let alone a massive infrastructure like that. So yeah, I feel about 3% of the way. I'm still sense making myself. I'm kind of in that phase right now.
Yeah. I think that's forever for all of us.
For sure. For sure.
Always evolving the sense making.
This is a fun tangent. Yeah. I mean, I think to come full circle to substances and all of that, because I was talking about all these things, it feels like coming back full circle to it. Like, I really understand that people are having really profound experiences that they've never had before. I really understand it. And I see it because that was me.
Yeah.
Very clearly. I remember like taking a pop brownie and like just forgetting who I was and like having incredible experiences with beings and all sorts of stuff, you know, but then coming out of it and the next day being like, that was the craziest pot ever. Like, I'm never doing that again. Why the fuck did I do that? Not like, holy shit, there's a profound layer of reality that I've never been able to access before.
Well, because nobody talks about those experiences as reality.
Yeah.
It's seen as like a fairy tale or fictitious or...
Yeah. So I understand. But now being sober for a long stint of time, like, I think there's this deep, like, almost this like plea within me. And I think that ends up coming off as anger sometimes, and I get frustrated, but really it's just this like deep internal, like overwhelming, like love and compassion for all of these people who are turning to substances and like don't know that they can access it without that, and don't know that it's not the substances at all, and that often those substances are just really sticky, challenging landscapes.
I think you end up having to do so much more integrating,
and so much more cleanup.
Takes longer.
Yeah.
To get to where you're going, when literally, oh my God, who's ever listening to this podcast that does drugs, just ask, literally check in and ask and be like, hey, what would be my insight that I'd get if I took this tab of LSD?
Yeah. And I think often...
And it's going to come in, I promise.
Yeah. And I think there would be a light element to it, but I think often the awareness that's there, like if I feel into it, like often the awareness, because I've had this question inside of myself too, you know, like what would happen if I dabbled with certain substances again, or what if I would have smoked weed or whatever? And it's like, you'd feel a shit ton of anxiety. Eventually you'd start to pop through with it, but you'd also have like elements of like kind of just negative, crappy beings coming in and kind of pulling on certain pieces of you. And it's not necessarily a terrible thing, but they're just kind of resonant with that like frequency. And at the end, you'd probably come out with some lessons, but you'd also come out with weird, twisted perceptions of what you think you have to do in order to get ahead. That's actually still beings pulling on you, and they're a detour. And what's actually here is much simpler and truer. Like, I think those are the places that I tend to... Yeah, those are the places that that's just kind of what I see.
Get.
That is, I think, what I would get. So what I would end up getting out of that is like, oh, I don't need to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you just learned the lesson.
Funny. Yeah.
It was like when there was this woman that wanted to work with me and it totally wasn't aligned, but the dollar signs, I was like, cha-ching, you know, in my eyeballs. But then when I felt into it, I like got the lesson immediately, because you asked me, you were like, oh, what would be the like lesson at this? Because all my no's were coming up. It was like, nope. Yeah. But maybe money.
Yeah.
But we don't do things out of alignment here at the Second Paradigm for dollar signs, because fuck that shit.
We're tempted sometimes, but we don't.
For sure. And I got the lesson. I just asked. I was like, what would I learn? And I knew. Yeah. I knew exactly what I would learn. I got it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need to learn that. I'm good. I'm solid. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah,
it's the same thing. And I think like even just talking about like entrepreneurship and like the spiritual communities and like spiritual business coaches and all of those types of things, like what we end up doing is we end up unraveling all of that stuff for people, with people, like everything that they've ever learned about how they're supposed to be and how things should be for them, and all of that stuff. Like it all comes back to this like really simple truth that like you already know. And then we just hold the fucking field of you already know. We hold that with such tenacity that like you can't help but know your fucking truth.
Because it's true. And we also lay a lot of context and say it's not going to be as fast as you want it to be.
Yeah.
But those experiences and those ceremonies and those medicines, like they're not actually making you go any faster. They're just showing you visions of things that are ahead. Maybe it's from your soul. Maybe it's not.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of cleanup and discernment that happens there, and you don't actually get there any faster. And often you're destabilized for long enough that you have to restabilize, and then you're at the starting line again.
Yeah. And the lesson is, whether it's the drug-induced experiences or the mentors, is like, trust yourself.
Trust yourself, keep going.
You already know.
You don't need anything external. Yeah. The answers are already within you. You're way more intuitive than you already know. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yes. Fuck.
Yeah.
That's why I love what we do.
Yeah, me too.
Even doing this podcast is awesome.
Yeah. Man, I just have this like such like soft spot in my heart for I think it was zooming out all the way. You know, when I go back out all the way and I go back into the big context and I see what I'm like really doing here, then I like come back to these things that I get really fiery about and I'm like really opinionated on. I'm like, fuck, I get it. I'm like, damn it. I like get it so much. I get wanting to go faster.
Oh yeah.
I get wanting to have profound, like undeniable experiences. I get like just sitting in a chair and staring at the sky and asking to see an ET or like a craft for like 3 hours and you're just sitting there like ungrounded as fuck. Like I get it.
Yeah.
Like, just wanting confirmation that the spiritual
They
reality
only show
is
up
real.
if you're grounded, by the way.
Totally. But like it doesn't work.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah, I'm looking for like sustainable soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
Slow, steady, true, real.
Mm-hmm.
There's like no sudden like knee jerk things. But I went through that phase too of like it wasn't through drugs, but it was just through like exploring energy, and I was like all up in the dark shit because I was like, ooh, this is cool. And I just wanted like the like profundity of it. I wanted to be able to like brag about it or like share my latest download or my latest dark being attack. You know, it was weird. I don't know why, but it's just a phase I think we go through when we're opening up to this world. And but if you're on the fence or if you're someone who's like, oh my God, I don't think I'm supposed to do drugs, you're probably not. Like trust yourself. Yeah. Because yeah.
No matter how much spiritual people talk them up, I mean, there's a definite destabilization that's there. And I think most of our people, like most of the people who come to us, like they're really here to engage with the world in a real and substantial way, to build an empire of their essence. That's like, that's the next program that we're eventually going to be running. It's like these longer term containers, and like that field and that container and that thing that like all the people that are coming there, like I don't see these crazy transcendental experiences as being a piece of that. No. It's very slow, smooth, steady unfolding into who they truly are. And
their gifts are like, it just reminds me of what we talk about this all the time, but it's like, it's the like ninja, like covert.
Yeah. It's like skills. An undercover agent of divinity.
Yeah. And I love that.
Me too.
I love that so much. And the people that will see it will really fucking see it, and they'll see your gifts and they'll be like, holy shit. Totally. Like you're fucking tapped in. Like, how did you know that? Like one of our friends, like she's incredibly tapped in. It's bananas. Yeah. And she works for nonprofits. She's worked for different organizations before that you would never assume, but she uses her psychic gifts in a really cool way. Yeah. And she's not like sitting at psychic fairs with a crystal ball. She could, but
so ridiculous. Her abilities are blow my mind.
But like, it's just what's here right now for her is to be human and use her gifts in a really human way. Yeah. And that's super cool. And the ripple and the impact that she makes from being like disguised as a human.
Totally. From helping like aerospace companies get grants, like from like very, very practical. Like,
Yes.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's super cool.
And I see that as so much more integrated than like someone who like dresses up in a robe and's like, come hear me speak, you know, and like who's like very overtly spiritual. Like there's an element of being very, very blatantly spiritual. Yeah. And like playing into the spiritual archetypes that I see as like escaping the world, as wanting to separate ourselves from the world that we actually live in, and not wanting to be a part of modern culture, and not wanting to integrate into the world, and not wanting to be received by the larger world just by little pockets of spiritual communities that all kind of validate the same behavior that's just blatantly disregarded by the rest of the collective. And I think the further you go in that direction, the further away you get from your life's mission and purpose of bringing soul here. Yeah, here. To like this the densest world, this planet, pieces. These politics, this president, this monetary system, capitalism, like the dollar, like all the way into these systems. Like that's where the real work comes in. And that's where the like brutal, deeply confronting, like differentiation between body and soul comes. That's where like the real work begins. For fuck sure. For fuck sure.
For fuck sure. It's my quote of the day. Yeah. I know. I'm even thinking of our friend Amateo with cryptocurrency. Like it just makes sense. It's like bringing all of that divine intelligence and all of those downloads that he was getting over the years.
Yeah.
And it's like practical application. That's really fucking cool.
Yeah. For someone who's channeled in front of like 10,000 people to then go and be working on like the frontiers of modern currency is really cool.
Yeah.
Really, really cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. God, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that it gets to be like covert. Like I feel like my spirituality is very like unassumed. Like I don't know that you would know it if you passed me on the street.
Yeah.
Or the people that do know how deeply spiritual I am, I think are like, wait, what? You follow politics? Like you listen to all that? I mean, obviously not anymore because the podcast, but oh, you listen to the stock market? Like what the fuck, Miriam?
Yeah.
You like the millennials on YouTube? You're obsessed with all of them? Yes, I sure am. Like, yeah, there's just like all these unassuming qualities, I think, about both of us, that it just keeps it real.
Yeah. Deeply, deeply grounded and integrated.
It's cool. I have to pee.
All right.
Do you have to pee?
I think that's it. No, I don't have to pee. That's not
We always race to the bathroom after the podcast. If I say it first, I think that I have the right to use the bathroom.
It reminds me of the
first.
same moment where you're like, oh, was that on last podcast?
What?
Where you're like, are you going to cry? And I was like, oh, it's in the field.
It's in the
It
field.
reminded me of that, where you're like, I have to pee. Do you? Is that just something?
Is
that
it
a
in the
download?
field?
Or do we just both have to pee all of a sudden? All right, my love. Let's do it.
Okay. Let's
Let's,
pee. Let's go
let's
pee
pee.
together. All right. Ballsy Fridays.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. Keep going.
Keep trusting.
And welcome home. And there's a video here that YouTube is recommending to you. And there's another video. What do we want to pull up?
Having and becoming more.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. Let's talk about, or not talk about. Let's also put,
This is new to us.
Having and becoming more. I know we haven't thought about a podcast to put here yet.
I was just checking out our kitchen.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty.
I
love
know,
our
I love it.
modern bright kitchen.
Oh, look, you can see the second paradigm.
Oh, good. A little bit, right?
Yeah.
So yes, having and becoming more, and a video that YouTube's recommending to you, and we'll see you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
By soul where the world stands witness.
In my mind, I'm all alone, stuck in time, but in my soul, I always know I am more.